Violent onslaught against women continues. The latest news about the kidnapping and murder of former EFF General Secretary and now lawyer Gordrich Gardee's daughter has enraged the community. In another case, a woman in the south of Johannesburg was sexually assaulted and stabbed. Also this week, she had to crawl to the nearest taxi rank for help. And of course, we know there are many other cases reported and unreported. Just when will this attack on women stop? What needs to happen? I'm joined now by gender activist and researcher at the University of Johannesburg, Lisa Vetten. She joins us virtually. Lisa, thank you so much for your time. Yesterday, the police minister announcing a 72-hour, saying that police should find something in 72 hours. This is something that proves, right, this is what the team behind the scenes was telling me during a meeting, that this proves that police actually can. It's just that they show their muscle when, it's a high-profile person.
Exactly, and the unfortunate effect of that is it creates inequality in access to policing services. There are very, very many women, children, men out there who still to this day are waiting for an arrest to be made. And I think it's in cases where a stranger is involved that the police are least likely to make an arrest. So it's very good to see them putting the effort in here, but we would like to see that extended to the other tens of thousands of rape cases or other murders where there's a stranger involved and nobody is ever arrested.
And actually, what do you say then to families who, for instance, their daughters, didn't trend on Twitter, or their daughters are not from families that are, high-profiled in society, until today, probably even 2 or even 5 years later, they still don't have answers. What do we say to those families?
I don't think we should be saying anything to them. We should actually be looking at ourselves and asking, why do we pay selective attention? What is this inequality of attention? Because it's quite clear that the police and the courts are driven by public outrage. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, why can we not be equally outraged about all such murders? Because that seems to be the switch that gets the criminal justice system to work. But beyond that, I think there's also a question to be put to the minister as, tell us what you're doing to improve things. Why does everybody have to get outraged every single time before something happens consistently? Because we have inequality of justice and inequality of attention, which leaves families cynical and disbelieving in justice, and more, it leaves communities cynical, and it helps reinforce the sense that there is actually no real value in reporting. And it does sometimes also fuel vigilantism. Communities thinking, let's rather take the law into our own hands than wait for the police to do anything at all.
I can imagine, Lisa, what he would say. I can guess a little bit what he would say if he was here. He would probably talk about the fact that there are some good cases that they are able to crack, which is true. We can grant them that. But also he would say to you the ratio, in terms of how many police officers there are compared to the community that they serve, as well as the type of crimes that, are committed in South Africa. Police are basically feeling under siege. I think maybe that would be one of his excuses.
That will probably be his excuses, but I mean, this is a long-standing problem. I can remember doing research in 2003 in Gauteng. And one of the findings that was quite striking was that if you were raped by a stranger, those are the cases that were most likely to never result in an arrest and never go anywhere. So, I mean, we've been hearing this excuse since at least 2003. What are the police doing about this? I mean, the questions we must ask is, are they actually making the detective services sufficiently attractive in order to pull police into it? What are they doing to skill their detectives? I mean, there are times when they've reported to Parliament previously that a quarter of their detectives have never been on any kind of detective training. That is very, very concerning. We do have a high rate of stranger homicide and stranger rape in South Africa. It requires very specialized detective skills. And so the questions are, what are the police doing? We don't just want to hear excuses about how difficult it is. We'd like to hear about what they've done for a change.
I want to go back to the point that you made, that we also need to look, at ourselves as society. Why aren't we enraged by every single crime against women and children, etc.? But also looking at ourselves in society, the truth of the matter is most of these cases, women die and are raped at the hands of people they know and trust. I think that's the other very painful and very, frightening issue. It's either an uncle or a cousin, a husband, a boyfriend, someone you trust, usually is the one that eventually goes to jail for this.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think sometimes the focus on strangers disguises that reality. It's easier to fear people out there than to fear those who are around you, especially, because especially if that's who you're depending on for accommodation, food, and all the other things that go with economic dependence. And I think that's where we are not doing a particularly good job, is understanding the complexity of the relationships between people. It's nice and easy to say, oh, just leave. But I don't think we're properly understanding the stickiness of, shall we call it love, whatever we want to call it, that makes it so hard for people to leave. We're also not understanding or taking sufficient steps to look at economic dependency. What alternative housing options are there available for women? They cannot live in shelters forever, nor can children. What is Housing and Human Settlements doing about providing access to housing? I think we have a broad problem of unemployment in South Africa. I grant that. It's not unique specifically to women in abusive relationships, but it's likely to be intensified. What are the options? How are companies linking up with shelters, for instance, to offer that kind of skills training? Because that does make it easier to leave. It's also, I think, often family and friends get frustrated because they see a woman staying and she's not leaving, and they get frustrated. They think she doesn't want help. But if there were more options available, then I think people could support better and give more advice and help, because there would be a greater number of options than simply going to the police to do something about the problem.
And just very quickly, a colleague of mine was saying that, when he looked at it, the ratio is actually not that different when you compare how many police to the society they serve there are in South Africa compared to other countries. And a lot of people would say it's because in South Africa we're a more violent country when you look at it statistically. Is this really true, or are we finding also other countries, are not reporting, crimes against women as much as we are now? Is it showing that more women are coming forward, which is probably something positive to look at as South Africa? Maybe more women feel that they can report the crime, whereas in other countries, women are too scared and it's underreported?
A combination of both. I think we do have higher levels of crime, but I do think reporting has increased over the decades. And we do need to take that into account, I think, in terms of how we allocate police. But I think it's also, where do the police sit? A lot of them are sitting in management. They're sitting in offices, shuffling papers. So what we actually need to look at is the ratio of those who are actually doing the day-to-day detective, community service centre on the ground work. What does that ratio look like? Because those are the people who are doing the work, not shuffling papers.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to me here on All Angles, Lisa. It's always good to have you. Lisa Vetten, she's a gender activist and a researcher at the University of Johannesburg.